The following episode of The Cards Court was recorded on Monday, February 5th. The Cards Court is a presentation of SportsLink Digital Radio, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. Chirp chirp and go Cards!
Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of The Cards Court, the number one weekly Ball State basketball show in the world. I'm your host, Griffin Leonard. Joining me this week as my co-host, as always, is Sam Niger. Joining us later on the show will be Charlie Maurer, the former Women's Learfield voice and current Ball State SportsLink student. With that, the court is now in session. Unfortunately, Sam, unable to join us until the next segment, so it's just me for now. But we'll get Sam and Charlie on here just after the break. But first, let's get you through this past week of Ball State basketball. Started off on Tuesday. The men's basketball team hosted Bowling Green and suffered a 9-point loss at home to the Falcons. Women's basketball took on Kent State. Big game there for the Cardinals against the third best team in the MAC, and the Cardinals won a defensive showdown for 57-46. Then we move on to the weekend matchups. Doubleheader on Saturday. Women's basketball team at home, 97-66, cruised to a win against the Ohio Bobcats. And then the men's basketball team continued their winning streak on the road. They beat the Western Michigan Broncos 77-67. Talking about Ball State women's basketball first, it was a interesting game to say the least against the Kent State Golden Flashes. It was another one of those games where you know that the other team has the talent to beat you. It was just, could the Cardinals overcome it? And the answer was once again yes. Katie Shoemate, 22 points and 7 rebounds, but 5 turnovers for the Golden Flashes star. She shot 8 for 17 from the field and was, for the most part, pretty okay, but the rest of the team didn't really pick up too much of the slack, only accounted for 24 points across the rest of the roster. Notably, Tatiana Thomas, 0 for 7 from the free throw line, but she did have 8 rebounds. Free throw shooting was a struggle, to say the least, for Kent State. Just 23% from the free throw line, which is just truly remarkable. But they didn't hit a free throw until in the fourth quarter. They were 0 from the free throw line. Didn't hit a three-pointer until the fourth quarter, which made the game a little closer than it initially was. For Ball State in that game, Allie Becky continues to shine. 16 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. And the surprise off the bench a little bit, Annie Roush, second leading scorer, 15 points and 7 boards. Ball State, a couple of big wins. They improve to a wondrous 10-0 in conference play, 20-2 overall. As of today, as of the time of this recording, the AP poll is out. No vote still for the Ball State Cardinals, but the coaches poll is set to be released tomorrow afternoon around the time this episode will come out. And it remains to be seen as to whether or not the Ball State Cardinals will be in the top 25, but I'd say it's about 50-50 based on the results of the last week. Moving over to the men's game, a tough loss against Bowling Green, and in that game, it was just the main story was a struggle from Jalen Anderson trying to avoid turnovers. He had 9 turnovers in that game, which is just it's difficult to succeed from an offensive standpoint when your point guard is struggling at that level. Jalen Anderson's more than capable of putting together a good performance, but turnovers weighed him down in that game. 9 turnovers, just 7 points. But Bashir Jihad continues to shine for Ball State. In the game Saturday, it was the comeback win for Ball State. They responded and got another big win in the MAC. They've won 4 out of their last 6, folks, and for a team that started out just dreadfully in the MAC, they've really climbed back into a decent spot. Winners of 4 of their last 6. They're tied for the last spot in the MAC tournament, and I continue to believe that they'll be just fine in the end. Jalen had just a true comeback game in that one. 20 points, 6 boards, 5 steals, and only 1 turnover. So Jalen Anderson is starting to find his groove again. Trent Middleton Jr. really starting to step up as a freshman. 13 points, 6 boards, 6 for 6 from the free throw line. And guys are starting to make a little bit of an impact off the bench. Yuri continues to get a little bit of playing time, and Ben Hendricks and Mason Jones continue to play significant roles off the bench. When we get back, we'll talk to both Sam Niger and Charlie Maurer about how the season's going, and this big week, which includes the second installment of the MAC Sunbelt Challenge. Looking forward to that big game against James Madison for the women's team, which will be at home and nationally televised. The men's team have a pretty good game lined up against Texas State that we'll talk about here in a minute. We'll be right back on the Cards Court. You're listening to it on the SportsLink Digital Radio Network, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. Welcome back to the Cards Court here on the SportsLink Digital Radio Network, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. We finally have our co-host Sam Niger on, as well as we're joined by former Learfield voice of the Ball State women's basketball team and current Ball State SportsLink student, Charlie Maurer. Charlie, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's a long-time listener. I've listened to a few over the past, and I'm like, I have to get on this show. I have to convince Griffin and Sam to let me on this thing. So finally, I don't know if it was a light week, whatever, but I'm happy to be here. So.
Hey, you pulled the strings. It was nice.
Yeah,
it
we're
worked
happy
out.
to have you. Now for the viewers to get to know you a little bit, I'm sure a lot of them have heard your voice either on ESPN Plus or on the radio last season. But just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you started, like as far as getting into broadcasting, and just a little personal info.
Well, first, thank you. That's very kind. I hope people of the Muncie community maybe recognize my voice a little bit. But no, it's been a really, really good young career for me. I've been very fortunate and very blessed in the short years that I have been able to do some play-by-play broadcasting at first Carmel High School. So I'm a native of Carmel, Indiana. I was a part of their radio program, their student-based radio program, and they have a sports department within that, and I saw it and I was like, I'm all about it. I played sports growing up. I went to a big high school, obviously at Carmel, and I was at a point where I couldn't play anymore. I couldn't play competitively for the team because, I was a little 5'6" kid coming in freshman year, 5'8", whatever, and I wasn't athletic enough. So I was like, I want to stay involved in sports in some form or fashion, and broadcasting was something that popped up and I immediately ran towards. So I've been calling games since my sophomore year of high school. So I'm a senior now at Ball State, so better part of 7 years-ish now, and an internship, obviously the Learfield job in between those, but no, it's been a fantastic journey, and it's at the end of the day, it's talking about sports, and so many people ask me, like, how's it feel to like go into a career where you could just get to talk about sports and talk about the game, and it's literally my dream. It's been my dream since I was 15 years old, and hopefully a long career is ahead of me, but we'll find out here soon enough. But no, that's where I got my start. Student radio, and Ball State was just right up the road, an hour away. And obviously, I'm sure you guys have talked about plenty how the opportunities that we can get here at SportsLink, and I jumped right on it coming into my freshman year back in 2020, and yeah, had some pretty cool opportunities since then.
I was going to ask you what led you to stop playing sports, because that was the same thing. I showed up to high school, played baseball a couple years. I wasn't good enough, so I was like, yeah,
Nothing wrong
I'm a
with being
broadcast
5'8", though.
full-time.
You can still make it work at 5'8". Just speaking from a little too personal
Well, the
experience
difference
there. You
the
know what I
difference
mean?
is, Sam, between me and you is that you were probably a much better athlete than I was. I was a short, stubby little kid, and also, like Carmel, it's like if you're not 6 foot as a 15-year-old, like basketball was my sport.
Yeah.
If you're not 6 foot or close to, like going into freshman year, like you're not going to make the freshman team. And I wasn't that, obviously. So don't get me wrong, there were some really, really good basketball players that I played with in high school that were much better than me, and I knew we were going to make the team. And going in after 8th grade year, after that 8th grade year of middle school, I was like, all right, that's probably the last year of my competitive career. So yeah, it was all right. I've lived with it since, but no, Sam, you look like a good athlete over there.
I try my best. Maybe not so much anymore. College is the freshman 15. It's a real deal. It's a real epidemic.
Well, I think if you hopped on the court now, you'd probably pass out from a caffeine
That
crash.
is in fact correct. I am ashamed to admit that, but yeah, possibly.
Now, Charlie, you briefly mentioned the Northwoods League. Tell us about that opportunity and why that was so important for you to kind of get some quality and consistent reps and grow as a broadcaster.
Sure. I think you guys had Dom Liacani on maybe a few episodes ago, and he went into detail about it. But I was in Bismarck, North Dakota.
You were the voice right before him, correct?
I was, yep. So I was in the summer before him, so 2 summers ago now. And wow, what an interesting experience that was. Bismarck as a city is just completely out in the middle of nowhere. It's like you're literally driving. There's nothing out there. Then all of a sudden you kind of pass over this hill on the highway, and all of a sudden there's a city right there, right? And it's Bismarck. But no, the community there was fantastic, and they love the Larks, right? So the Bismarck Larks, the Northwoods League team, it's been around for now 8 years, going into their 8th year, I believe, and I mean, they just live for the baseball summers, and being able to be their play-by-play broadcaster was really fun. Met some great people, got some really great reps as well. That was the first summer actually that the Northwoods League created a partnership with ESPN. And so if that was the first time that Northwoods League games had the ESPN Plus platform. And I had some experience, right? That was after my sophomore year of college, right, at Ball State calling some ESPN Plus games, but I really didn't have the expectation. I was like, all right, we're going to do our local stream, and it's going to be a good time, and it's going to be good, right, reps for everyone. But then we got the platform, right? We got the opportunity to broadcast our games on the ESPN Plus platform. We had thousands of people watch. Right, the numbers were astounding, right off the bat, and that turned into a really big blessing for us, being able to have that platform. But met some really great people, got to meet, the team and the coaches, and learn their stories and learn more about the game of baseball. Because going in, that was the sport that I'd called the least amount, right, in my career as a big football and basketball guy. And so that summer it was 60, 70 games in 80 days, whatever it was over the summer, and it was go, and I'll look back at that summer forever and be like, yeah, that was kind of your first taste of maybe your, a semi-professional career, if you will.
You took the Learfield job last year. Let's kind of talk about the women's basketball team. Getting that opportunity, you got to really, really get to know Ball State women's basketball, and they had quite the ride last year. Some record-breaking players that some of them are here, some of them aren't anymore. What was your experience like working for that team, and how has that team morphed into this year's program, and what changes have you seen there, even though you're not currently covering the team for Learfield?
I will always be a fan of Ball State women's basketball for the rest of my life. I will always pay attention to how they do, how they perform year in and year out, just from that year that I had last year, right? So I was a junior, I was still an undergrad, and I think I was, if not the first, one of the first undergrad voices of any Ball State team, I think, in the history of the university. And so getting that opportunity was outstanding. Big shout out to Shane Nichols, Sean Sullivan, Mick Tidrow as well, who's helped me along the way and given me those opportunities. But the team is awesome. I mean, Brady Sally, if you're not paying attention to Ball State women's basketball on social media, like, I don't know what you're doing. Like, he's so entertaining, and the girls respect him so much. And it's because at the end of the day, he's one of the most successful coaches, right, in the history of Ball State athletics, right? He surpassed the 200 win mark last year, which I got to be a part of, which was great. And the team was fun. You had people like Allie Becky still in her sophomore year. You had Anna Clefane and Thelma DeSagerstarter in their final years, right, who were premier elite players, some of the best in the history of Ball State women's basketball, get to compete. And that was a fun team, right? Won 20 games, finished in the top third of the MAC standings, got to go to Cleveland, obviously, and had a really good chance of making the MAC championship, maybe even winning it. Obviously, it didn't work out the way that they wanted to, but I got to do every single game, and it certainly was a commitment, but it didn't feel like a job all the time because, going on the road and, eating with the team and just talking ball with the players and the coaches was truly a awesome experience. And kind of leading into this year, like the team is just so much different. Right? Like it's very similar in some ways, but like I feel like the pieces that they've added, people like Nyla Hampton, right, who has completely elevated, right, the game of that entire team has been awesome to watch. I hope that this is the year that Brady, gets off the schneid, if you will, and gets that MAC championship, because I think this team is one of the best in the country, not just in the Mid-American Conference. Don't get me wrong. The MAC is a very competitive conference in women's basketball and men's basketball. But, I mean, you got great teams, and Ball State has so far so good. You're going to run into some more troubles as we get into the second half of MAC play. But, yeah, I mean, being able to kind of get those relationships last year and then see how they've improved and what's different and still what's kind of the same from last year's really been fun to watch from a fan perspective now this year.
And Charlie, the catch is with this women's basketball team is that they've just come so close so many years in a row now, but they haven't gotten over the hump of winning a MAC championship, and you got to see the team kind of in the lowest of lows last year after they lost the MAC championship. What do you think that this team specifically has done to change, not necessarily their style, but their culture to be able to embrace the winning that they have so far this year?
I'm not sure the culture has necessarily changed. I think it's just the pieces. Primarily, I think Nyla Hampton, right, has really elevated the team as a whole, right? Nyla Hampton coming off a MAC Defensive Player of the Year award a year ago, broke the single-season record in Bowling Green history in steals in the season, had the most in the MAC as well that year. Like, her defensive presence, her intensity on that end of the floor is just unlike anything that I saw last year, right, from anyone else. I mean, we saw almost every single team, right, in the Mid-American Conference, and Nyla Hampton was the hardest defender, right, that I think Ball State saw all season long, as did many teams, right? And I think what Nyla really elevated was Allie Becky. She's already a fantastic player. She's already one of the best in the conference, but you've seen her take another step this year, not only offensively, but defensively. Like, I think that entire team is a better defensive team because of Nyla, not just Nyla, but a lot because of her, because she brings it every single day, and you do not get a possession off of Nyla Hampton's guarding you.
Yeah, well, I think that she brings that intensity, and I think her teammates then match it, and that's one of the big difference makers. I was there with you in Cleveland, and we both saw that semifinal, and I was there in the press conference and just could see just how much that opportunity had meant to them, and you know that they want revenge this year. And we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we're going to talk about how they can finish the job and get there. Then they're in a great spot, but you still got to win the tournament. We're going to talk about how they can get there right after the break here on the Cards Court, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie on the SportsLink Digital Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Chris Taylor, Senior Director of Digital Sports Production and Ball State SportsLink, the nation's first 4-year academic digital sports production program. It's the intersection of sports and storytelling, where we're training the next generation of digital content producers. It's truly unique because a lot of schools have sports broadcasting and sports journalism, and while we have elements of both of those, our focus is on sports media production and the behind-the-scenes work. And I think that's what separates us at Ball State, because a lot of schools will teach students to learn production or live event streaming, but we're teaching storytelling. And that is producing long-form, layered feature stories where we can humanize our student athletes and our coaches and tell the story as to why they're playing their sport at Ball State. Anyone can produce or edit things that are flashy and look good, but can you tell a story? And at Ball State, I think we really teach that, and the success is evident.
Welcome back to the Cards Court here on the SportsLink Digital Radio Network, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie, here alongside Sam Niger and our guest for this episode, Mr. Charlie Maurer. Charlie, before the break, we were talking about the differences between last year's women's basketball team and this year's, and the added energy of Nyla Hampton and the difference that makes. They're sitting at 10-0 in the conference. Running the table to this point and looking at the schedule, I don't think it's impossible to say that they could continue on that path. As the season continues to wind down and you have some tough road trips against Toledo and Kent, how do you get over the hump? How do you continue to just sucker punch every opponent and ride the momentum that you've currently got to Cleveland?
Yeah, I think it starts on the defensive end. I mean, you really saw it in that Toledo game. Right, like Toledo came in the best defensive team in the MAC, and Ball State said, we're just as good, if not better, than you guys at defense, right? And that's what has really gotten them through some tough games. Like that Kent State game here, like it was maybe, I mean, that was a gross game. You can make, right? Like it was kind of ugly, right? And you know, the coaches are not going to describe it that way, but the fans obviously will. It was an ugly game. Right, and they still were able to grind and fight their way to victory, even though those were the two best offensive teams in the MAC, and they combined for like 98 points, whatever it was. Right, like who in their minds would have expected that to happen? So it stays on the defensive end for them, and it goes back to Nyla and what she's brought on that table. But at the end of the day, you have pieces on the offensive side that you have seen. Maddie Bischoff, who has filled the Telma Disaguirre role from a year ago, I think pretty well. I mean, she's shooting better than almost anyone, right? It feels like in the country at this point. When she has an open look, you would just expect it to go in from beyond the arc. And Allie Becky's going to be a first-team All-MAC selection, and with good reason. I mean, she can pretty much get whatever shot that she wants on the floor. And at the end of the day, when the offense isn't there, Allie Becky's a person where it's like, I'm going to go get a bucket, and she can do it, and she's done it all season long.
And one of the aspects of this team that I feel like is underappreciated is their play from the bigs. I mean, there was really no change from last year to this year in terms of the pieces that Ball State has in the post, but the production that they're seeing from literally their big three down low has been spectacular. And what has been the difference for those three to be able to put the right foot forward and maybe have their best season as a unit that they've had their entire careers?
Yeah, a pivotal part of that team is Annie Roush, Alex Richard, and Marie Kiefer. Right, a year ago, they had Telma. I know they play positionless basketball, but for the sake of people understanding, Telma Disaguirre, who was a three-point specialist, was pretty much Ball State's power forward last year. Right, she played the four, and she guarded the second right tallest player, if you will, on opponents defensively. Well, they've switched that now. Marie Kiefer and Alex Richard are now both in the lineup, and Richard, I think, went so far under the radar, like flew so far under the radar last year, and her impacts this year have not by no means have gone unnoticed, but she has great post moves down low. She has excellent post moves. She's got a fadeaway jumper. She's great at creating space and getting open wedges, if you will, around the rim. She's good with both hands, right? She understands spacing really well. But then you add in people like Marie Kiefer, who sometimes struggles on the offensive side of the floor, but at the end of the day is going to be one of the better shot blockers in the MAC year in and year out, and that's what she brings. And she also can really run the floor well. Ball State loves to run transition and fast break. That's how they score so many points. And Marie Kiefer can run. She can. She moves really, really well, and that's been a key thing. And then Annie Roush. I mean, graduate senior, she's experienced. She comes off of the bench, and she very well could give you 15 off of the bench. She's done it multiple times this year. She brings the experience, the IQ, right? When Allie Becky maybe has to take a seat, or when, you know, Marie Kiefer, Alex Richard have foul trouble, you have no problem putting Annie Roush in there and thinking that anything is going to change from your quote-unquote backup center, because at the end of the day, she could be starting for a lot of programs this year, but she's filling her role perfectly. It's kind of that sixth player off the bench, if you will, and she's done it. I mean, she's done it for the majority of her career, and she hasn't skipped a beat this year.
Yeah, Ball State's quote-unquote stars are in the backcourt, but they have 3 starting 5 quality bigs. You can't start them all. That is a good problem to have if you're Coach Brady Sallee. And Annie Roush, you mentioned her ability to come off the bench. That Kent State game, she was the second leading scorer on the Ball State Cardinals. Like, she's not always going to be on, but that's the great thing about having all 3 of them. you don't need them to all be on. And I was screaming during the offseason. I was like, please start 2 bigs next year. And that's exactly what we've seen from them. And I think it's worked so well. Is that what gets them over the hump in Cleveland?
I think it does. I mean, listen, we need to rebound better. We do. Like, for having a team that has 3 great bigs, it feels like we should be able to rebound better. When Ali Becky's your leading rebounder, that's always, I guess, a little concerning, right? But having 15 fouls, right, between the 3 of them against teams like Toledo, who have 2 excellent bigs who can score really well, is going to be huge, right? Because you're going to see a team like Toledo or Kent State who has really good bigs, right? Kent State has got Bridget Dunn, who's a full stretch 5, and Marie Kiefer has no problem stepping out from beyond the arc in the defensive end and guarding someone at the 3-point line, right? Like, that's a big advantage. So at the end of the day, it's going to be people like Ali Becky, Nyla Hampton, Maddie Bischoff, who, when it comes down to it, need to make the big shot, and I think they will. But how do they maybe continue to win in MAC play? I think it probably does start with the bigs on both ends of the floor.
Well, Ball State women's basketball has certainly spoiled us rotten this year. They've been so much fun to watch, and I can't wait to see what they're capable of as this season winds down. As we turn the page over to the men's side of things, it's been a little more of a rockier road, to say the least, for Ball State men's basketball, but they're on a positive note as of late. 4 out of their last 6 in the win column. They're finally winning on the road, which took them until, I believe,
the halfway point.
Mid-December to get their first road win. So positive signs from Michael Lewis and co., but still maybe a little ways to go. When you're looking at midway through the MAC season, they're tied for the 8th spot in the tournament. Where do they go from here, Charlie?
They keep going up. I mean, like, listen, I understand when you come off a season like they did last year, 21 season in Michael Lewis's first year, you obviously are going to have expectations at least somewhat close to those from a year ago. At least you hope. But, like, this is a brand new team. Right? You're starting at times 2 true freshmen, and then Jalen Anderson, who's arguably your best player, right, who comes from Loyola Marymount. Like, this is a tough conference. Like, this is difficult, right? So I didn't appreciate the heat that was on Michael Lewis and Ball State at first, right? And they had a somewhat easier non-conference portion, and they won a lot of those games as they probably should have. But you have Toledo, Kent State right off the bat in your MAC portion of your schedule, and then, right, you lose a tough one to Central Michigan, and then you lose a tough one to Miami of Ohio. It's like, yeah, things are looking bad. They're 4-2 in their last 6. Like, they're playing better basketball. They're competing on the road now, right? And they're starting to get wins on the road too. Like, Jalen Anderson's a bucket. Bashir Jihad, he's a bucket. Davion Bailey is a perfect example of a 3-and-D guy, and he's only going to get better. Mason Jones has looked unconfident at times, and you think he's just going to not be confident for the rest of his career? Like, these are true freshmen, and all of them who are getting, like, major minutes were all Mr. Basketball candidates in the state of Indiana. And anyone who's from the state of Indiana knows that those kids can play basketball. They just need the reps and the experience. We're going to get better as the season continues, and it's starting to show right now. Not to say that we're not going to maybe have a couple of bad losses here and there, because we are a young and inexperienced team. But yeah, if we sneak into the 8 seed, I think whoever's in that 1 seed might not be very thrilled to play us, because we play really good defense. We play fundamental defense, and that's what Michael Lewis preaches first and foremost. And then the scariest thing is that if we figure it out on offense, like, that's the scariest thing, is that, like, if we can actually come together as an inexperienced team and figure out how to consistently score the basketball and get open looks for the guys that we want to get open looks, like, by the time that we get to, March, I would not want to be the 1, 2, or 3 seed, whoever ends up playing Ball State, if they do end up making that 8, 7, 6 seed. I think we're only getting better, and we're going to continue to get better.
And one of the things about this Ball State team, when it comes to their inconsistency and their lack of experience, they haven't necessarily fought through adversity yet. They've faced adversity, and they've come out on the losing end of it. You talk about that Miami of Ohio game, the Central Michigan game. They've got an Ohio game coming up tomorrow or today, depending on when you're listening to the podcast, that this is an Ohio team they haven't beat since before COVID. This is an Ohio team that knocked them out of the tournament last year in the first round.
And the year before that.
And the year before that. So this is some serious adversity but it's a winnable game. This is not like they're going into a Toledo or an Akron type of game where you're obviously not the betting favorites. They have a legit shot. They're going to face some adversity. How important is this game in particular to kind of right the ship this year?
Yeah, it's important, just like every game is important.
Yeah.
You know, like you want to win your home games, especially in conference play. And yeah, there's extra motivation added on there just because Ohio has done quite well against the Cards right in the years past. And you, of course, are probably thinking about it a little bit, that MAC tournament game, Ball State the 4 seed, Ohio the 5 seed. Ohio played an excellent tournament. They gave everyone a run for their money right in that tournament. So yes, definitely important to win your home games. But like, again, this is a team that's going to have some losses that you wanted them to win. Like, we're not a Toledo, right, or a Kent State or whatever, where we're going to come in and even if we're down by 10 at half, like we're just going to find a way to win. Like, no, every game's going to be a grind. And at the end of the day, that's going to improve us. It's going to make us better. Yeah, I would like to see us beat the Bobcats. You know, like that one stung. We were in Cleveland, Griffin, right? And we were watching both tournaments. And yeah, that was disappointing, right, to say the least. But I like Ball State when they play at home. I think they play really well, and the crowd usually shows up. And if they get off to a hot start early, I think they have a really, really good chance.
Well, and we got to send it to another break, but I'll end on this. You made the comment earlier. You weren't sure if we were having a slow week here. We were originally supposed to interview Mason Jones as part of today's episode.
That would have been a much better interview. I'm so sorry for the listeners.
But Michael Lewis, as far as I'm aware, canceled all media interactions for today just because he wanted to focus on this game in particular. Michael Lewis and the Ball State men's basketball team are tired of being kicked around by Ohio. They want it to end tomorrow. We want it to end tomorrow. I can't wait to see what happens. When we get back from the break, we're going to talk PBP's keys, and we'll send you on your way here on the Cards Court, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie on the SportsLink Digital Radio Network.
To catch the best stories in Ball State sports every month, tune in to the award-winning show, SportsLink Stories, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. Victory Honda of Muncie is proud to support the creative storytellers of Ball State SportsLink.
Welcome back to the Cards Court on the SportsLink Digital Radio Network, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. Still here with Sam Niger and Charlie Maurer. Decided we're just going to go with you the rest of the way. Why not?
I'm all for it. Also, that riff is just
Isn't that intro music just spectacular?
I love it. We're dancing in our chairs every time. Like, it's fantastic. It gets me ready to go and talk about Ball State sports. I'll say that much.
I love it. Well, let's get you into PBP's keys. 3 keys for these two teams to unlock if they're going to find success in their upcoming matchups. We'll start with men's hoops. Sam, we just talked about it, but you got to overcome the demons of Ohio. It's been far too long. Coming up on 4 years, I think just eclipsed 4 years since we've beaten the Ohio Bobcats. Now, no better time than the present.
You're right, Griffin, but I sound like a broken record every week on this show talking about the inexperience of this team. I think in this case that might actually help them, because as new as this team is, that means there's very few players on this roster that have faced Ohio and faced those tough losses against the Bobcats. They're starting to find their stride. We've talked about 4 in the last 6. You hesitate to say unexpected win, but a win while facing some adversity on the road over the weekend against Western Michigan, that only helps their cause. I mean, for Ball State, it really just is Michael Lewis, Bashir Jihad, and Mickey Pearson Jr., who are really fighting those demons of those past losses against OU. For the rest of the team, this is just any other opponent, and as focused as this Ball State team has been this week heading into tomorrow's game, I do still think that it's going to be important for this team to rally together and face that adversity, and I think they have a legit shot to finally knock off the Bobcats.
Well, and I think it would do a decent job of helping to silence some of the haters if the Cardinals can get a quality win at home.
Agreed.
It's been a little while, and I think the majority of the fan base is ready for a big one. Charlie, let's turn to women's basketball. I think there's some football game Sunday night, maybe.
Are you sure?
I know there's some sort of concert but I'm not. I don't know. But more importantly, Ball State James Madison in the second half of the Sun Belt MAC Challenge, an opportunity for the Cardinals to ball out on national TV on the same network as this football game, and a chance for them to really put a chokehold on the MAC in terms of showing off what they can do.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. Brady Sallee is going to make sure that no one on that team gives a crap about that football game on the same day, right? Super Bowl Sunday. Like, this is going to be a huge matchup, and it's kind of a blessing. I think it is a blessing for them. I mean, James Madison is 16-7. They're third in the Sun Belt so far this year. Like, this is a really tough opponent, right? You have your Toledos and Kent States and Bowling Greens who are really, really good MAC opponents, and you know you're going to see them again, and it's all going to build up to the MAC tournament. But having this Sun Belt Challenge now and getting James Madison is going to help this team in the long run. Right, 16-7, a really, really good team. They have some solid wins. I mean, they went toe-to-toe with Toledo. They beat Xavier on the road in Cincinnati. Like, James Madison can play.
They're legit.
Yeah, absolutely they are. So it's going to be a really, really exciting game. Ball State has to go to DeKalb on Wednesday, which is outside of Buffalo. I mean, NIU might be the worst road trip, just speaking from experience, right? Like, we got to fly to Buffalo last year, which was fantastic. But NIU is just, like, short enough to where we're not flying and just long enough for it to be an inconvenience of a bus ride. Like, it's like around a 4.5, maybe 5 at most, like, bus drive. And so it's a night game on a Wednesday. They're going to be getting back, early Thursday morning, and DeKalb is not a super fun place to play, right? That was a really, really fun game last year. Ball State, NIU came down to the wire. So they have to worry about NIU first, but back-to-back matchups in the same week, especially that Sun Belt Conference Challenge. James Madison, a really good team. It's going to be a good test for Ball State.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the few times that I'm envious that Ball State isn't grouped up there with all the Ohio schools where it's like half an hour down the road. But then again, I'm not making the trip myself, so I guess it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? I feel bad for Buffalo every single year. I assume that they fly a lot, but like NIU in the same boat, right? They're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. They're far enough from Ohio where it's like probably in the range of like a 6 or 7 hour bus ride. Like, oh gosh, that'd be brutal. But yeah, NIU, DeKalb, they're a good team this year. It's going to be a fun matchup.
Yeah, well, James Madison will be, I would assume they're flying out here on Sunday. It's a team that you mentioned, some really good wins. They also beat VCU and Wake Forest, another big one. They've knocked off a couple Power Fives, but then we turn our heads to the third key, and this one's a little simpler. You just got to watch your turnovers. Ball State on both sides, men's and women's, have had struggles. And it's kind of one of those issues that pops up really regardless of how good of a team you are. You're always going to have those games, but it's important to limit your turnovers. Jalen Anderson with 9 against Bowling Green on Tuesday. The Cardinals as a whole on Saturday against Ohio up near 20. So just a couple things to tune up.
Yeah, and don't think that the turnovers are just going to vanish before our eyes heading into this week. There's going to be jitters for both these home men's and women's games just because they do mean a little more. Ball State against Ohio on the men's side, and then the James Madison game on the women's side. There's going to be nerves heading into that game. There's going to be some early turnovers. There's always some sloppiness at the start of games. It's about not turning the ball over down the stretch, and I think that's really hurt the men's team, is not valuing the basketball late in that second half. If they're able to value the basketball and still play sound defense, I think that's going to be what gets it done. And then on the women's side, you just have to limit those turnovers. 20 turnovers is not going to win you a ton of games. They lucked out this week that they were playing an Ohio team that was only rostering 8 players heading into that game. They cannot turn the ball over 20 times against James Madison, and Brady Sallee knows that, and they're going to be able to at least limit the turnovers to the best of their ability.
And so unlike, right, the Ball State women's team to have those turnovers, just because it's such a strong suit of them to be forcing turnovers, right? Like, if anything, you could say like the half-court offense hasn't been fantastic for the women's team this year. And it's because they force 20 turnovers a game, it feels like, and they get runouts, fast breaks, quick transitions. It's why Maddie Bischoff gets so many great open looks, right? It's on those fast breaks and transitions. Allie Becky is a wizard and can get to the rim whenever she wants. And when she has, right, when the tempo is up and they're forcing turnovers, that's how they've won so many games. And so when you see these like other turnovers at least forced by themselves, not the greatest thing to see, obviously, but this is a team that is going to protect the basketball, I think, consistently. I'm not sure you have to buy into, like, this is a team that has a turnover problem. It's just they had a tough game against Ohio.
Yeah, well, and I feel like the men's and women's teams are polar opposites when it comes to style of play. The men's team, one of the slowest teams in the MAC per possession, and then you see the women's team flying out on the court for 40 minutes. It's how are they even from the same school, you know? But that's PvP's Keys. Let's take a quick look at the upcoming schedule. It all kicks off on Tuesday. Men's basketball hosting Ohio at Worthen Arena. If you can't be there in person, make sure to check out the SL Digital Call. Evan Stowell and Sam Egan along for the ride from Worthen on Tuesday. Then we go to Wednesday, as mentioned before, Ball State Women's on the road at DeKalb out in northern Illinois. That game tips off at 6 Central, 7 Eastern. And then the SBC MAC Challenge. Ball State men's basketball goes at Texas State. That'll be a 5 o'clock tip-off on Saturday. And then the big kahuna of women's basketball versus James Madison. That will be tipping off at 2 p.m. Right here in Muncie, and that game can be caught on SL Digital Radio with talent to be determined. So I guess you'll have to keep on the lookout. But that'll be all for this episode of the Cards Court. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to join us next week when we continue to talk Ball State basketball and get you ready as Cleveland draws ever so closer. Until then, for Sam Niger and Charlie Maurer, I'm Griffin Leonard. Thanks for watching this episode of the Cards Court. The court is now adjourned.
Go Cards.
The Cards Court is hosted and produced by Griffin Leonard and co-hosted by Sam Niger. Be sure to follow BSU SportsLink across social media for the best stories in Ball State sports. The Cards Court has been a production of Ball State SportsLink.